Day 957 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzie here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 661,000 military personnel losses, representing an additional 1,160 in the past day. Then as for the hardware losses, 14 tanks, 31 APVs, a whopping 64 artillery, plus a whopping 96 vehicles. Then also a remarkable 2 air defense system losses, including this short-range OSA system and this Tor M2 short to medium range air defense system. With a side note to this that both systems operate as self-contained units, able to independently perform the full cycle of detection, tracking, and engagement without needing separate radar vehicles or external tracking systems, making for quite the chink in the armor. Because further to that end, these aren't just isolated blows, as these specific types of losses also represent a significant weakening of Russia's overall air defense capability. Because with every destroyed air defense system, Russia loses not only the physical units, but also the now further removed capability to share radar data with surrounding systems to make for a better integrated network of defenses. All as a result, leaving Russia's vast airspace increasingly vulnerable to future attacks. Then we'll move across to the map today and head direct to Crimea, as a large oil depot in Feodosia has been heavily targeted by Ukrainian attack drones overnight, causing a massive series of blazes. The Feodosia oil terminal, the biggest in Crimea for handling oil products, in fact the largest petroleum transshipment hub in the peninsula, has now suffered some significant damage to its storage and infrastructure, affecting fuel supplies in the region. And this follows Russia's earlier loss of 3 railroad ferries, further complicating supply lines to occupied Crimea. Thick smoke from the fire could be seen from 25 kilometers away, or about 15 miles, and Russian emergency crews were struggling to contain the blaze. Ukrainian forces claim that they've effectively cut off Russia's ability to supply Crimea through occupied Ukrainian territories, making events like these particularly devastating for the support of the occupation of the peninsula. The facility was recently upgraded with air defense units, specifically that of the short to medium range Pantsir and the long range S-300 systems. However, that sounds like less of an upgrade and more of a what's left over and available situation. Because you'd ideally want an updated S-400 at this location over the S-300, but also a Tor M2 or Tor M3 over a Pantsir, simply due to them being more modernized and more capable platforms. The timing is well placed too, as this fire raged into the morning of October 7, which just happens to be Vladimir Putin's birthday. He is now 72 years old. Then on the map, headed direct to the Donbass's Pokrovsk axis of attack, where it's a mixed bag of events here most recently. So in touching upon Russia's northwest directional push to its main objective, it's been about 6 or 7 days since there have been any gains or even changes on the map in this quadrant. And so to zoom in, the western edge of this direction is fraught with difficult lakes and rivers to pass, with the northern edge being much the same, which means that heading specifically in the northwest direction between those natural obstacles might be the most achievable pathway for the Russian forces to get to Pokrovsk. Although appearances can be deceiving, because there's a separate Ukrainian-controlled town just beyond and before Pokrovsk that would certainly work as a means to slow down an invading force. Not to mention, to reach that point, the Russian army has about a 2 to 3 mile wide gap in which to pass through from their current positions, as they usually aren't willing to contend with the natural river and lake obstacles on either side of their invasion. As a result, it creates an almost choke point-like situation whereby Ukrainian forces use that more advantageous positioning to direct their supporting artillery fire within a confined area. Now, a most recent example of this would include the destruction of a Russian infantry fighting vehicle in this location, which appears to be a BMP with a mine roller installed, which is quite a rare sight. Typically it's on tanks or other engineering vehicles. And so this also perfectly exemplifies some further issues Russia will come up against as they look to proceed into a mine-laden environment. Then headed just south of this axis, for what we notice most on this sector of the map is the gradual withdrawal of Ukrainian forces in the eastern garrison beyond the Vovcha River, as it's been mostly agreed or said that, at this stage, the AFU is adopting an attritional grinding methodology against the Russian forces, combined with a gradual withdrawing of their own AFU forces as necessary, all whilst inflicting as much damage on the Russian army as possible, especially in sectors like here. In fact, the attritional grind of the Russian forces couldn't be more evident than in a location like this at the moment. Then we'll head further down on the map, where it's believed that Russian forces are preparing for a breakthrough near Orikhiv in the Zaporizhia region, as reported by Ukraine's Southern Defense Forces spokesperson, where a push is expected in the coming days. An auxiliary objective of the Russian forces is that they're aiming to disrupt Ukrainian logistical routes in the process as well. Intelligence shows Russian forces massing personnel and equipment in preparing for new offensive operations, where small assault groups backed by armored vehicles are expected. In particular, the city of Zaporizhia, 50 kilometers away from Orikhiv, is also stated to be a key Ukrainian-held target of Russia's. Interestingly, Russia's formal decrees and constitutional amendments state quite clearly that the city of Zaporizhia has already been annexed into Russian territory, even though their army never even stepped foot inside of the region's capital. What's even more interesting is that Russia thought it was accurate and fair to run a sham referendum for this oblast that only comprised of votes of less than 20% of the entire Zaporizhia Oblast population, just involving only those in the occupied region, completely ignoring the vastly larger population centers in the north. So the forcible conducting of a referendum in this manner, apart from being illegal under international law due to the occupation, it's just extremely ridiculous by its own merit. But it well appears now that Russia has no interest in stopping land gains if they believe they can achieve it. Then taking a brief look around the map today, because somewhere in the east we saw the destruction of another Chinese buggy, the Desert Cross 1000-3s. And yes, they are still around. Russia still uses them. Although due to the unfortunate cost of $20,000 per unit, it appears Russia is now moving more so into the direction of a two-wheel army. Then also in the east, we saw a Russian serviceman capture the consequences of the arrival of the Ukrainian FPV drone. Also in the east, we saw a lot of examples of Ukraine striking Russian logistics at their weak points, just like the 96 we saw today, so in this case, the Buhanka van or the pickup truck edition. But as for these events in the east, not every example is a Ukrainian winner. Take for example this video where a usable piece of electronic warfare system or systems were deployed by Russian forces to take out this Ukrainian FPV drone. Here you can see the FPV loses connection with its operator, followed by passing by 3 likely vehicle targets to its left by a wide margin, as it plummets into the ground. So it's the less common examples like these where the upcoming Ukrainian drones of the future will automatically switch to autopilot with AI integration to continue their targeting objectives without the need for a wireless operator from further afield when the connection is severed. However, more often than not, an event like this, the one we see here, is usually quite rare, as the AFU, through a combination of backup frequency switching or encrypted comms lines or signal boosters to help override the jamming, typically stops these types of events from even occurring. Not to mention, some Russian electronic warfare devices are completely fake, cheap Chinese ripoffs that never worked in the first place. It also seems the supply of the electronic warfare systems that Russian soldiers do have are quite a rare resource, as one Russian soldier just today took to social media to complain about the Chechen forces stealing his unit's jamming devices. Such a typical Chechen Akhmat unit action, isn't it? Not interested in fighting and doing anything to protect themselves. But back to this latest example, because although the future of AI drone technology will avoid this type of instance, the biggest gains to be made on that upcoming front is through ultra-high accuracy combined with incredibly efficient single-shot targeting. Then elsewhere on the map, and a little bit off-brand, and into the Bryansk Oblast of Russia, as a military musical was on show, premiering at a teachers' conference in Bryansk, which is all part of Putin's latest plans regarding the re-gearing of the entire Russian society into a more militant stance. There's a lot more to this wider story, which I should cover in a later video soon, but essentially Putin appears to be unashamedly, deliberately targeting younger generations as a strategy to shape the future of Russia's future army. Then we'll head across to some news, and we'll start with a Ukrainian hardware news update. Or is it a Russian hardware news update? Because Russian military experts believe that Russian air defense systems are helpless against the upcoming deployment of Ukrainian ballistic missiles that are currently in final phase testing. So the Russian source says, quote, Russia almost does not have any Patriot-type systems capable of shooting down ballistic missiles. These are systems from Moscow's defense system and possibly the new Russian S-500 system, which is currently being tested. That is, the creation of a Ukrainian ballistic missile means Russia is turning into a naked king. Now, it's a slightly imperfect translation, but you get the point. Russia's single S-500 air defense system will do the job on paper, but it's just the one prototype, where part of the battery was in fact reportedly targeted some time ago in Crimea. Russian S-400 systems, as another option, could theoretically help, but their primary role is the targeting of aircraft and cruise missiles. They do have some capability to intercept shorter-range ballistic missiles, but it's not designed to counter long-range or intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, as effectively as more specialized systems like that of the US Patriot or THAAD systems. Not to mention, Russia has been losing these S-400 systems in vast numbers due to this war. Now, lastly, Russia has a single A-135 system dedicated to defending Moscow, and you may not have heard of it, as it defends really just Moscow and specifically Putin, perhaps the Kremlin too, from ballistic missile threats. Now, designed in the 70s, it never got its upgrade to the A-235 system, and simply performs a very acute role, and certainly not for general purpose use across the country. So these are all glaring insufficiencies on the part of Russia's ballistic missile air defense front, which is truly a startling realization. Because upon Ukrainian deployment of this ballistic missile type they're just about to proceed with, Ukraine won't need any international permission to strike with these types of platforms within Russian territory, leading to Russia having to move everything, including its air force, 500 to 1,000 kilometers away from their own borders. This is what unchecked corruption will do to a society, and it is significant. Then headed across to a quick and interesting segment to round it all off with today, guys, because the recent talk of the town was this supposedly 85-meter high, or about 280 feet high, Russian tank turret toss, which has apparently exceeded the previous record set by another Russian tank of about 73 meters high, if I am to buy into some of the exactitude of these figures claimed. But given what we see here, I think it's at least fair to say that that is one high-flying turret toss. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. Please continue to like, comment, subscribe if not already. Like I say, helps boost out the channel, spread the message, all of that. And yeah, I really do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.